The sound did not echo. It cracked. A sharp, sudden strike cut through the quiet of the penthouse dining room. Crystal glasses trembled. Conversations froze mid-breath. Every eye turned toward Eloise Finn as her head snapped slightly to the side. Her cheek burned, but the pain did not come from the hand. It came from the silence. Across the table, Marceline Finn stood tall, composed, untouched by the moment she had created. Her posture never shifted. Her face held no regret. This was not an outburst. This was a decision. Eloise did not raise her voice. She did not touch her face. She did not step back. She stayed still, absorbing the weight of what had been done to her in a room filled with wealth, order, and watching eyes. She turned slowly, not to Marceline, to her husband. Matthew Finn sat frozen. His fork rested against his plate. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. Shock flickered across his face for a brief second, then faded into something worse. Quiet. No chair moved. No hand reached for her. No word left his mouth. In that moment, Eloise understood something with painful clarity. The strike was not the deepest wound. The refusal to defend her was. Around them, no one spoke. No one intervened. Respect, loyalty, and love were tested in a single second, and only one person stood alone. Eloise felt it then. Not anger, not fear. Finality. The room did not rush to comfort her. It watched. Soft lighting reflected off polished surfaces. Wealth sat neatly arranged on every side. Yet, Eloise stood exposed, struck in a place where status offered no shelter. Her cheek burned, but the deeper ache settled lower, heavier. This was not private pain. This was witnessed pain. Pain delivered where escape was impossible. She felt the weight of eyes on her back. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some relieved it was not them. And still, her husband said nothing. No defense came, no protest followed, no boundary was drawn. Silence, in moments like this, speaks louder than cruelty. Let me ask you something. If someone humiliates the person you claim to love, and you stay quiet, what choice did you make? Was it peace, or was it permission? Many people believe harm requires action. They believe damage arrives through harsh words or raised hands. Few understand how deeply silence cuts when it replaces protection. Eloise did not feel small because she was struck. She felt small because the one person who should have stood chose comfort instead. This is the kind of moment that reshapes a life, not because of what was done, but because of what was allowed. And if you have ever stayed quiet to keep things calm, if you have ever watched someone you loved face harm while you remained still, this story will speak to you. Because silence always leaves a mark. What happened in that room was not a loss of control. It was a choice. Marceline's hand delivered the strike. Matthew's silence delivered the verdict. Betrayal does not always arrive loud. Many times, it arrives calm, seated, and well-dressed. It arrives when someone watches harm unfold and decides staying comfortable matters more than standing firm. Matthew did not agree with his mother. He did not support the act. But he also did not stop it. And in relationships, neutrality during harm is not neutral at all. Eloise waited, not because she needed permission to leave, but because part of her still believed love would show up late. That belief lasted only seconds. Silence settled between them, like a closed door. In that space, Eloise learned a truth many people learn too late. Loyalty is proven in pressure, not promises. Protection matters more than apologies offered afterward. This story is not about a slap alone. It is about what happens when someone learns their safety ranks lower than peace, their dignity lower than convenience. Some moments do not ask for patience. They ask for a stand. And when that stand never comes, the relationship has already shifted, even if no one admits it yet. Eloise felt the shift clearly. Something inside her steadied. Not from strength she practiced, but from clarity she could no longer ignore. From that moment forward, nothing would be the same. Welcome back to Love Tales with Mr. Easton. This channel exists for stories like this. Stories where love faces pressure, where dignity faces silence, where one moment redraws an entire life. If you believe respect matters more than appearances, if you believe love should protect instead of observe, take a second to subscribe now. These stories are told for people who value self-respect and truth. Because what happened to Eloy Finn did not end at that table. Moments like this often look small from the outside. A family dinner, a disagreement, a pause, yet they carry weight that follows people for years. Many walk away from scenes like this and stay. They convince themselves time will soften things. They wait for apologies. They accept quiet regret in place of action. Eloy did something different. She did not argue. She did not beg. She did not explain herself to those who already chose comfort. She stood up with calm control and chose herself. And that decision, made in a room filled with power and silence, set a chain of events into motion that no one at that table expected. This story will not rush. It will not exaggerate. It will show you what happens when dignity leads and accountability follows. Stay with me. Eloy did not leave in anger. She left with clarity. That matters, because choices made in clarity reshape outcomes in ways anger never could. She walked out of that building with nothing packed and nothing planned. No speech, no threat, no promise to return. What followed was quiet, deliberate, and unseen by those who believed she would fade without their approval. Matthew searched. He asked questions. He waited for time to soften what silence had broken. Time did something else. It built a life far from boardrooms and glass towers. A life where mornings held purpose, where evenings carried warmth, where love showed up through presence, not titles. Years passed, and one ordinary day, in a place Matthew never expected to matter, his past stood in front of him again. She did not look broken. She did not look bitter. She looked whole. Before he could speak, voices reached her first. Small voices, certain voices, voices that changed the meaning of every quiet year between them. What Matthew saw in that moment forced him to face the full cost of the night he stayed seated. This story is about what silence destroys. It is also about what accountability can rebuild. Stay with me. By the end, you will understand how walking away did not end anything. It prepared something far greater. And when the truth finally stands in the open, it asks one question. Was love lost? Or was it waiting for courage? Eloy met Matthew Finn long before power shaped the way people saw him. At the time, he was already successful, but he was not yet guarded. His days were full, but his presence was easy. He listened more than he spoke. When he laughed, it came freely, without calculation. They met through work, but not in a room filled with titles or hierarchy. Their first real conversation happened late in the evening, after most people had gone home. The building was quiet. The pressure of performance had lifted. For once, Matthew was not being watched. Eloy noticed that first. How different he felt when no one expected anything from him. They spoke about ordinary things. Childhood habits. Books they never finished. Small fears neither admitted out loud before. There was no effort to impress. No rush to define what this was meant to become. What drew Matthew in was her steadiness. Eloy did not compete for attention. She did not soften herself to be liked. She spoke with clarity and paused when she meant to think. That calm made space around her. What drew Eloy in was how safe he felt in those early days. When he reached for her hand, there was no ownership in the gesture, only warmth, only presence. Their connection grew slowly, without spectacle. Coffee turned into long walks. Conversations stretched past midnight. When Matthew spoke about pressure, Eloy listened without trying to fix him. He once told her he felt seen when he was with her. Not admired. Seen. That mattered. At the time, Eloy did not know his family well. She knew of them, of course, but not their influence. Matthew spoke of his mother with respect but distance. He framed her strength as tradition, not control. Eloy accepted that explanation because love was easy then. When love feels safe, questions wait. Neither of them noticed how uneven the ground already was. How much of Matthew's life belonged to expectations he never questioned. How often Eloy adjusted simply because she could. At the beginning, none of it felt like sacrifice. It felt like choice. In the beginning, their love lived in quiet spaces. It showed up in early mornings before schedules took over. In late nights when Matthew loosened his tie and leaned back, finally allowed to rest. With Eloy, he did not need to perform. He could exhale. They learned each other in fragments, the way Matthew always checked the door twice before sleeping, the way Eloian folded notes into books instead of bookmarks. These details built intimacy more than grand gestures ever could. They cooked together when time allowed. Simple meals, nothing elaborate. Eloian laughed when Matthew overseasoned everything. He pretended not to notice, then smiled when she reached for water. There was tenderness in those moments. Touch without urgency, conversation without fear of saying the wrong thing. When Matthew spoke about work, Eloian listened with focus. She asked thoughtful questions, never pushing him beyond what he chose to share. He appreciated that restraint. It made him feel respected. When Eloian spoke about her goals, Matthew encouraged her. He told her she was capable. He said he admired her independence. And he meant it, at least then. They built routines that felt like promises, Sunday mornings, short trips when schedules aligned, private jokes that made crowded rooms feel smaller. Love, in those days, felt balanced. Yet even in warmth, subtle patterns formed. Matthew's time was limited, and Eloian adjusted hers to fit. When his schedule shifted, hers followed. When meetings ran late, she waited without complaint. She told herself this was compromise. That support meant flexibility. Matthew noticed her willingness, but he rarely questioned it. When things went smoothly, there seemed no reason to. He did not ask what she postponed. She did not offer what she surrendered. Their connection deepened through proximity, not challenge. Disagreements stayed surface level. When tension appeared, Eloian softened first. Matthew appreciated harmony. Peace felt earned in his world. They mistook ease for security. In private, love felt strong. In public, expectations slowly crept closer. Matthew's life carried weight Eloian had not yet fully felt. At this stage, love still felt safe, but safety built on quiet adjustments carries a cost, even when no one notices it being paid. The imbalance did not arrive suddenly. It settled in quietly. As Matthew's role expanded, so did the expectations around him. Meetings grew longer. Travel became frequent. Decisions followed him home, sitting heavy in his posture and tone. Eloian adjusted without marking the change. She became more flexible, more understanding. She told herself this phase would pass once things stabilized. But power rarely pauses. Matthew's time became structured by others. His attention followed urgency. When choices needed to be made, work always came first, not because he valued it more, but because it demanded him more loudly. Eloian learned to wait. She delayed her plans to match his availability. She rescheduled commitments without asking if he would do the same. When conflicts arose, she yielded first, telling herself this was partnership. She did not see it as imbalance. She saw it as love. Yet small moments revealed the shift. Conversations ended when his phone rang. Apologies replaced presence. Decisions were announced rather than discussed. Matthew did not intend to dominate. He simply became accustomed to being centered. When he spoke, rooms listened. When Eloian spoke, she often paused, checking his expression before continuing. That pause grew familiar. It felt subtle, but it mattered. Her confidence did not vanish. It narrowed. Matthew still praised her strength. He still admired her mind. But admiration did not translate into protection or priority. Power changes how silence functions. When one voice carries authority everywhere else, its absence at home grows heavier. Eloian felt this most when disagreements appeared. Matthew avoided them. He sought resolution through calm avoidance, believing tension resolved itself when left untouched. She disagreed quietly. She learned to frame concerns gently, carefully, as if tone mattered more than truth. She told herself this was maturity. What she did not see was how often she stepped aside to preserve ease. How rarely Matthew stepped forward to protect her place beside him. The imbalance remained unnamed, which made it harder to confront. No moment announced it. No argument exposed it. It simply grew. And when power tilts unchecked, love shifts from shared ground to negotiated space. Marceline Finn never announced authority. She assumed it. Her presence carried certainty. Not loud, not rushed. She spoke with measured calm, as if every word had already been approved by tradition. When she entered a room, conversations adjusted around her without instruction. Eloian noticed this early. not through confrontation, but through pattern. Invitations came with expectations attached. Seating was arranged with meaning. Comments arrived wrapped in courtesy, yet they landed with precision. Marceline never raised her voice. She did not need to. When Eloise spoke, Marceline listened with still attention, then responded with faint smiles and careful pauses. Those pauses often carried more judgment than words. She asked questions that sounded polite but carried weight, about Eloine's background, her upbringing, her sense of order. Each inquiry felt like assessment rather than curiosity. Matthew framed his mother's behavior as concern. He explained her manner as care shaped by legacy. He encouraged patience, reminding Eloise that approval came slowly in his family. Eloise tried. She adjusted how she spoke. She softened opinions. She learned which topics to avoid and which responses earned approval. She told herself this effort was temporary, a bridge toward acceptance. Marceline noticed the effort and raised the standard. Suggestions became expectations. Preferences turned into quiet rules. Nothing was written. Nothing was demanded openly. Yet deviation always met with subtle correction. Matthew rarely intervened. He believed harmony required restraint. He told himself his mother meant well. He avoided challenging her, choosing calm over confrontation. Each time he stayed silent, Marceline's influence deepened. Eloise felt it most during gatherings. How her presence felt evaluated, how her comfort ranked lower than appearance, how Matthew deferred without realizing it. Marceline never asked Eloise to shrink. She created conditions where shrinking felt necessary. The control worked because it was quiet, because it allowed everyone to claim innocence, because it framed obedience as respect. Eloise sensed the imbalance, but struggled to name it. There were no sharp edges to point at, no single moment to challenge, only a growing feeling that her place required constant adjustment, and Matthew, by staying neutral, allowed his mother's authority to extend where his protection should have stood. Eloise did not wake up one day feeling smaller. The change happened in increments, too subtle to resist. At first, she adjusted to be polite, then to be helpful, then to keep things smooth. Each choice felt reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern she did not question. She stopped correcting comments that misread her intentions. She let assumptions pass when addressing them felt tiring. When conversations leaned toward tradition or expectation, she listened instead of contributing. Not because she lacked thoughts, because timing never felt right. She noticed how often she measured her words before speaking, how she scanned faces for approval, how she rephrased honesty into something easier to accept. Her days filled with care for others, planning, remembering, supporting. She handled details Matthew never saw. She absorbed pressure quietly, believing partnership meant carrying weight without complaint. Matthew praised her calm. He admired how little she asked for. He saw her adaptability as strength. Eloise took that praise and adjusted further. She postponed personal goals, telling herself there would be time later. She let invitations pass when they conflicted with Matthew's schedule. She softened her presence in rooms where she once stood comfortably. None of this felt like loss in the moment. It felt like maturity, yet small signals appeared. She laughed less freely. She paused before sharing ideas she once spoke with ease. She found herself agreeing faster, even when she felt unsure. She did not see this as erasure. She believed love required compromise. She believed endurance proved commitment. What she did not notice was how rarely anyone asked her to take up space again. Marceline's standards tightened around her. Matthew's silence made adaptations seem necessary. Eloise responded by becoming quieter, hoping effort would earn ease. She still loved deeply. That love guided her choices, but love without balance bends inward. By the time Eloise sensed something was off, it felt normal. She told herself this was how marriages evolved, that personal edges softened over time. She did not yet understand that shrinking is hardest to reverse when it happens slowly. Matthew believed calm solved most problems. In his world, conflict carried cost. Disagreements slowed progress. Tension demanded time he rarely felt he had. He learned early that keeping things smooth preserved momentum. At work, that approach paid off. At home, It created distance. When friction appeared between Eloian and his mother, Matthew chose quiet management. He listened. He nodded. He offered explanations without taking sides. He believed restraint showed wisdom. He did not see how often restraint felt like absence. When Marceline questioned Eloian's choices, Matthew stayed still. He reasoned that engagement would escalate matters. When Eloian fell silent at gatherings, he assumed she preferred it. He mistook her composure for comfort. Matthew avoided confrontation because he believed love thrived in peace. He told himself that standing between two strong women would only deepen strain. So he stepped back, hoping time would soften edges. Time did not soften anything. It clarified priorities. Each moment Matthew chose calm over clarity. Eloian felt the gap widen. Protection does not always require raised voices. Sometimes it requires presence. Sometimes it requires choosing a side. Matthew rarely did. He offered apologies after discomfort, not prevention before it. He reassured Eloian privately, while allowing pressure publicly. He asked for patience instead of change. Eloian accepted those reassurances because she loved him. She believed effort would be noticed. She believed loyalty would be returned when it mattered most. Matthew did not recognize how often peace favored those already in control. By staying neutral, he allowed imbalance to continue. He did not intend harm. But intent does not lessen impact. The pattern settled quietly. Marceline's authority stood firm. Eloian adapted further. Matthew remained between them without choosing either. In moments that required defense, he chose distance. And when protection becomes optional, trust weakens long before anyone names it. What once felt gentle began to feel careful. The warmth that defined their early days did not vanish. It narrowed. It showed up in fewer places. Moments that once flowed now required timing. Eloian sensed the change before she could explain it. Conversations paused more often. Laughter arrived later. Decisions felt heavier, as if each one carried unseen consequences. Matthew still cared. He still reached for her hand. He still asked about her day. Yet his attention split easily, pulled by responsibilities that never rested. When his phone buzzed, his focus shifted. When plans conflicted, his answer arrived quickly. Work always came first. Eloian told herself this was temporary, that once goals were met, life would ease again. She held on to that belief because letting it go would require facing something else. At gatherings, the tone tightened further. Eloian noticed how often she prepared herself before entering rooms, how she anticipated questions, how she chose silence over correction. Warmth requires safety. Safety requires defense. Without it, affection becomes cautious. Matthew felt the change too, though he could not name it. He sensed her pulling back, becoming quieter. He believed time would restore what pressure strained. He believed stability would return on its own. He did not realize how much of that warmth depended on Eloian feeling protected. Their home remained comfortable. Their routines stayed intact. Yet something fragile settled between them. Not anger, not distance, awareness. Eloian stopped expecting rescue in small moments. She learned to manage discomfort alone. She found strength in composure rather than support. That strength came at a cost. Love still existed, but it required effort that once felt effortless. And effort without reciprocity creates fatigue. By the time the tone fully tightened, both had adapted to the shift. Neither spoke of it directly. Neither challenged it openly. Warmth gave way to caution. Caution gave way to restraint. And restraint, when left unspoken, prepares the ground for fracture. By the time everything broke, the marriage rested on balance so thin it could not hold weight. From the outside, Eloian and Matthew appeared steady. Their life showed order. Their routines functioned. There were no public conflicts to point at, no obvious cracks. Inside, the balance depended on Eloian carrying more than her share. She absorbed discomfort to preserve calm. She accepted silence to avoid tension. She adjusted so often that stillness felt normal. What once felt like love now required restraint. Matthew believed peace meant success. He believed the absence of argument proved strength. He did not see how often peace arrived, because Eloian yielded first. Protection never became his instinct. He waited for moments to pass instead of standing inside them. Each time he chose stillness, the space between them widened quietly. Trust does not vanish all at once. It thins. It thins when defense feels optional. It thins when loyalty waits for privacy. It thins when dignity is left to stand alone. Eloian did not plan to leave. She believed patience would be rewarded. She believed effort would be recognized. She believed love would eventually choose her without prompting. That belief held until the moment it could not. This chapter matters because it shows how loss often begins long before departure, long before words are spoken, long before doors close. The lesson here is simple, yet difficult to accept. Love without defense erodes trust. If someone you love faces harm and you remain quiet, something breaks, even if no one names it. Before we move on, let me ask you this. Do you believe silence equals betrayal? Or do you believe it can still be called love? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And if this story speaks to you, like the video and stay with us. Because what came next did not begin with anger. It began with clarity. The dinner began the way many important evenings did in that household. Perfectly arranged, carefully timed, every detail chosen to signal order. The table stretched long beneath soft lighting. Glassware aligned with precision. Plates carried food prepared to impress rather than comfort. The city beyond the windows glowed quietly, distant and detached. Eloian sat beside Matthew, her posture straight, her expression composed. She wore a calm that had taken years to practice. Across from her sat Marceline Finn, already settled, already observing. Conversation moved politely at first. Updates about business, mentions of upcoming events, familiar names spoken with casual authority. Eloian contributed when appropriate, her tone measured, her words chosen with care. Matthew spoke easily. He appeared relaxed, confident in this space. This was his environment, his world. Marceline listened more than she spoke. Her attention stayed fixed on Eloian longer than necessary. Not openly, just enough to be noticed. As plates were cleared, the rhythm shifted. Marceline placed her fork down gently. The sound was soft, yet deliberate. It drew attention without demand. She lifted her gaze and looked directly at Eloian. No smile, no warmth. The room quieted instinctively. Eloian felt the change immediately. She recognized this pause. It was familiar, the kind that preceded correction. Marceline spoke calmly, her voice even and controlled. Her words carried judgment wrapped in composure. She spoke of standards, of upbringing, of structure. She questioned Eloian's background without raising her tone. The insult did not come as an attack. It came as evaluation. Eloian responded with restraint. She spoke of respect, of effort, of contribution. Her voice stayed steady. She did not challenge Marceline's authority. She defended her worth. Matthew remained still. He did not interrupt. He did not redirect. He watched. The room felt smaller as silence settled between sentences. The tension thickened, not through noise, but through waiting. Eloian sensed it then. This dinner was no longer a meal. It was a test. And every second that passed without intervention carried weight she could feel in her chest. Marceline did not rush her words. She never did. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle, as if what she was about to say required care rather than restraint. She adjusted nothing about her posture. She leaned neither forward nor back. Control lived in stillness. She spoke of lineage first, of how families carry values through generations, how structure shapes character. Each sentence landed softly, yet with intent. Then she turned her focus fully to Eloian. Her eyes held polite distance. Her tone remained measured. She spoke of Eloian's upbringing without accusation, framing her words as observation rather than criticism. "You were raised without guidance," she said calmly. "Without the discipline this family requires." The room did not react. No gasps, no interruptions. The absence of response gave the words space to settle. Eloian felt heat rise in her face, not from shame, but from the weight of being assessed publicly. She had faced judgment before, but rarely delivered so cleanly. Marceline continued. She spoke of expectations, of legacy, of understanding one's place. Her words implied Eloian's efforts were insufficient, her presence provisional. This was not anger. It was removal. Marceline framed exclusion as concern. She presented control as responsibility. The insult was precise, placed where it would not require correction. Eloian replied carefully. She spoke of respect for the family, of her work, of her commitment. Her voice did not waver. She did not raise it. She refused to bow without speaking. She met Marceline's gaze without challenge, yet without submission. For a brief moment, the room held its breath. Marceline stood. There was no warning, no escalation, no visible shift in emotion. The movement was smooth, almost practiced. The strike followed immediately. It was quick, decisive, delivered without hesitation. The sound cut through the room, sharp and final. Eloian did not cry out. She did not stagger. She stood frozen, as the meaning of what had happened settled deeper than the pain itself. And in the space that followed, one truth became unavoidable. This insult had never been about words. It had always been about power. The sound came before the meaning. A sharp crack split the air, sudden enough to steal breath from the room. Eloian felt the impact along her cheek, a burst of heat followed by a dull throb that spread slowly, deliberately. For a brief second, everything went still. Her vision held steady. The table remained set. The city lights beyond the glass did not flicker. Life did not pause to acknowledge what had happened. That was what struck her most. The pain was real, but it was contained. What overwhelmed her was the exposure. This was not private. This was witnessed. This was delivered in a space meant to reflect refinement and order. Eloian's head had turned slightly with the force. She brought it back to center with care. She did not raise her hand to her face. She did not step back. She refused to appear shaken. Her cheek burned, but the sensation felt distant compared to the weight settling in her chest. She could feel eyes on her, measuring her response, waiting to see how she would carry what had been done. Marceline remained standing, her expression unchanged. No anger showed, no regret followed. The act stood alone, complete. Eloian's body reacted before her thoughts caught up. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders squared. Years of restraint held her upright. Then she turned, not toward Marceline, toward Matthew. This was the moment that mattered. She searched his face for movement, for recognition, for something that said this had crossed a line no one could ignore. What she found was shock, brief and shallow. His eyes widened. His jaw tightened. Then his expression closed. He did not rise. He did not speak. He did not place himself between them. The absence landed heavier than the strike. Eloian felt something settle inside her, firm and irreversible. This was not confusion. This was understanding. In that silence, the meaning of the moment became clear. The pain on her cheek would fade. What would remain was the knowledge that when dignity required defense, she stood alone. The room stayed quiet. No one moved. No one intervened. Eloian realized then that what hurt most was not being struck. It was being watched. Eloian did not react immediately. She stayed where she was, steady and upright, giving space for what should have happened next. Her body remained still, but inside, time stretched thin, pulling each second longer than the last. She waited, not because she doubted what had occurred, but because part of her still believed love would arrive late. Her gaze stayed on Matthew. She did not plead. She did not signal. She simply looked at him, offering him the moment without demanding it. This was the space where protection belonged. The room held its breath. Even Marceline paused, as if curious how far her authority reached. Guests avoided eye contact. No one wanted ownership of the moment. Eloian's cheek continued to burn, but she barely noticed now. Her focus stayed fixed on her husband, on the man who once promised partnership, on the man who shared her bed, her plans, her future. She gave him time. 1 second, then another. She told herself he might stand slowly, that he might speak calmly, that he might draw a line without drama. Matthew's chair did not move. His hands remained still. His eyes stayed forward. He looked stunned, not resolved. His silence stretched, filling the room with weight. Eloian felt something inside her shift. Hope, small and careful, loosened its hold. Waiting can be an act of faith, but it can also reveal truth. She realized then that her presence did not create urgency for him, that her pain did not demand action, that peace for him still mattered more than defense. The waiting became heavier than the strike. In that pause, Eloian understood the depth of her isolation, not physical, emotional. She stood surrounded by people, yet unsupported. She had waited long enough. The moment had passed, and in its place stood clarity she could no longer deny. Matthew did not make a decision in that moment. That was the decision. He stayed seated, his body rigid, his expression caught between disbelief and restraint. The shock on his face softened into stillness, as if he believed time would correct what had already happened. It did not. His silence stretched long enough to become a statement, long enough to be felt by everyone in the room, long enough to confirm where safety ranked. Matthew told himself many things in those seconds. That reacting would worsen the situation, that his mother would calm down, that Eloian was strong enough to endure this without him stepping in. None of those thoughts changed the outcome. He did not speak her name. He did not reach for her hand. He did not stand between her and the person who struck her. By choosing calm, he surrendered protection. Eloian saw it clearly now. This was not fear holding him back. It was habit, a pattern built over years of avoiding conflict, of choosing ease, of letting moments pass instead of facing them. This was who he became under pressure. His failure was not loud. It did not announce itself. It sat quietly, dressed in composure, convincing itself it was reasonable. But reason does not heal harm. Matthew believed silence would prevent escalation. He believed stepping in would damage relationships he valued. What he did not consider was the relationships standing in front of him. Eloian felt the final thread loosen. The trust she protected through patience and adjustment had reached its limit. This moment confirmed what many smaller moments hinted at. When it mattered most, she would stand alone. That realization did not bring tears. It brought calm. Sometimes clarity arrives without emotion. Sometimes the truth lands clean and complete, leaving no room for debate. Matthew stayed still. The room stayed quiet. And Eloian understood that waiting any longer would change nothing. His failure to stand did not break the marriage in that instant. It revealed it had already been breaking. Eloian felt the decision settle before she moved. It arrived without noise, without urgency. A calm certainty replaced the tension that had held her in place. She no longer waited for anything from anyone in that room. She drew a slow breath and straightened fully, not in defiance, but in control. Her cheek still burned. The mark would remain for hours, maybe longer. Yet she understood something important in that moment. The mark did not define her. Her response would. She turned first toward Marceline. Eloian did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She did not ask for explanation or apology. Her gaze held steady, her expression composed. "I will not stay where I am tolerated instead of chosen," she said. The words were simple. They carried no threat. They required no response. Then she turned to Matthew. For the first time that evening, she looked at him without hope attached. Without expectation, she did not ask him to follow. She did not ask him to speak. She had already received his answer. What she chose now was not escape. It was preservation. Dignity does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appears as restraint, as clarity, as refusal to remain where self-respect is compromised. Eloian picked up her purse slowly. Her hands did not shake. Her posture stayed calm. Every movement reflected intention. No one stopped her. Marceline watched without reaction. Matthew remained seated, caught between regret and habit. Others in the room looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. Eloian did not look back. Choosing dignity did not feel dramatic. It felt necessary. It felt like reclaiming something she had gradually set aside. She understood then that staying would require shrinking further. Leaving would require strength she already possessed. She chose the strength. Eloian walked out without rushing. Her steps stayed measured as she crossed the room, passing the long table, the untouched glasses, the faces that would later pretend they did not witness what happened. The door opened quietly. No one followed. The hallway felt cooler, wider. The air shifted as if it carried relief. When she stepped outside, The night met her with calm indifference. Traffic moved below. Lights blinked across distant buildings. Life continued, untouched by the moment she just left behind. Eloian paused near the entrance, allowing herself one steady breath, not to gather courage, to acknowledge finality. She did not cry. Tears would come later, when safety allowed them. Right now, clarity held her upright. She walked toward the street, her reflection briefly catching in the glass as she passed. The mark on her cheek stood out, faint but visible. She did not hide it. She would not explain it either. Her phone buzzed once in her purse. She did not check it. Silence had already spoken enough. Each step carried her farther from the space where she waited to be chosen, farther from rooms where her presence required permission, farther from a marriage built on endurance instead of defense. As she reached the curb, a quiet truth settled fully. Leaving did not mean failure. Leaving meant refusal. Refusal to stay where harm went unanswered. Refusal to teach herself acceptance through patience. Refusal to model silence as love. She did not know where she would go next. She did not plan speeches or explanations. She knew only this: she would not return to a place that asked her to stand alone. A car passed. Wind brushed against her face. The city felt large again, full of movement and possibility. Eloian stepped forward into the night, carrying nothing but her purse and her dignity. Behind her, the building remained lit, polished, unchanged. Inside, people would continue dinner. Conversations would resume. The moment would be filed away as inconvenience. Outside, a life began to realign. The lesson stood clear and unshakable. Self-respect begins where tolerance ends. Eloian did not leave the city with ceremony. There were no goodbye messages sent, no final conversations, no announcements meant to explain or soften what had already been decided. She packed what fit into a single bag before dawn, choosing only what felt necessary. The city outside her window looked unchanged. Streets still glowed. Buildings still stood tall. From a distance, nothing suggested her life had just split open. She moved through familiar rooms quietly, aware that each step closed a chapter she once tried to preserve. She did not linger. Lingering invites doubt, and doubt was a luxury she could not afford. When she stepped outside, the morning air felt sharp and honest. It did not comfort her. It did not accuse her either. It simply existed. Eloian took one last look at the skyline, not with longing, with acceptance. This place held memories of love, hope, and compromise. It also held silence she would not return to. She left without direction fixed in detail. She knew only what she would not do. She would not stay close enough to be pulled back by habit or apology. She would not wait for explanations that arrived too late. The drive out of the city felt longer than it was. Traffic thinned. Noise softened. With each mile, pressure loosened its grip. She did not play music. She did not call anyone. The quiet mattered. It gave her space to feel the weight of what she had chosen without distraction. Fear appeared briefly. It asked practical questions. Where will you go? How will you manage? What if this costs you more than you expect? Eloian acknowledged the fear, then kept driving. Leaving did not feel like escape. It felt like alignment. For the first time in a long while, her actions matched her values. By the time the city faded behind her, she felt lighter. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because she was no longer carrying it in a place that denied it. She did not know yet how survival would look. She only knew this: staying would have cost her more. Eloian chose a place that asked little of her. No skyline, no status. Just a coastal town where mornings moved slowly and faces did not carry expectation. She rented a modest home close enough to the water to hear it at night, far enough from the city to breathe without being recognized. She used her grandmother's surname, not to hide, but to separate who she was becoming from who she had been required to be. Starting over did not feel brave. It felt practical. She found work she could do remotely, leaning on skills she once placed second to her marriage. The routine grounded her. Deadlines arrived without judgment. Effort produced results. There was comfort in work that asked only for consistency. Her days followed simple structure: early walks, quiet meals, evenings spent reading or watching the light change across the water. No one evaluated her posture. No one corrected her tone. She noticed how her body responded to the absence of pressure. Her shoulders relaxed. Her sleep deepened. Laughter returned in small, unguarded moments. She kept her circle small. A neighbor who waved from a distance. A shop owner who remembered her order. Conversations stayed light. She did not offer her story. She did not need to. At night, memories surfaced. Not the wealth. Not the arguments. The man who once held her hand during storms. The ease that once felt certain. Those thoughts came softly, then passed. She did not chase distraction. She let the quiet work through her. Starting over required restraint. There were moments when reaching out would have been easier, when answers might have eased uncertainty. She chose silence instead, not as punishment, but as protection. Each day without contact strengthened her resolve. She began to understand something important. Strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like routine. Sometimes it looks like choosing calm when chaos is familiar. Eloian built her days with intention. No excess, no performance, just stability she controlled. The life she created did not impress anyone. That was the point. In this quiet beginning, she reclaimed something she had lost slowly: agency. The realization did not arrive with drama. It came quietly, through small changes Eloian first dismissed as stress. Fatigue that lingered longer than usual. Mornings that felt heavier. A sense of imbalance she could not name. She told herself relocation took adjustment. That grief carried weight in the body. She continued her routines, trusting time to settle what felt off. Time did something else. One morning, standing in the small bathroom of her rented home, the truth met her without warning. The result sat clear and undeniable, leaving no space for doubt. Eloian stared at it longer than necessary. Her first reaction was stillness. Not shock, not joy. Stillness. Then came the rush of questions. Practical ones. Immediate ones. How far along? What now? How will this change everything? She sat on the edge of the tub, grounding herself with slow breaths. The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with consequence. Pregnancy had not been part of her plan. Not now. Not alone. Not after walking away from everything familiar. The timing felt unfair, almost cruel. Fear arrived quickly. Not fear of the child. Fear of the responsibility attached to protecting one. She thought of the night she left. Of silence. Of the space she now occupied because she chose dignity. The past and present collided in her chest. She considered calling someone, anyone. The urge passed. Eloian understood something in that moment. This truth belonged to her first. It required clarity before explanation. She took another test, then another. Each confirmed what she already knew. As the hours passed, fear shifted shape. It did not disappear. It focused. She pressed a hand to her stomach, tentative, almost hesitant. There was no connection yet. Only awareness. Only weight. This was no longer about recovery alone. This was about stewardship. She did not cry. She did not panic. She let the truth settle fully before responding to it. By evening, she made tea and sat by the window, watching the light fade over the water. The future felt uncertain, but one thing was clear. She would not return to a life where protection was optional. This child would not grow within silence. The discovery did not break her. It anchored her. Fear arrived in layers. At first, it focused on logistics, appointments, finances, time. Eloian wrote lists she did not yet need, then folded them away. She allowed fear its moment without letting it lead. Then fear turned inward. It questioned her strength. It asked whether leaving had made this harder than staying ever would have. It whispered doubts late at night, when the house felt too quiet. Eloian listened without obeying. She remembered the room she walked out of. The stillness, the waiting, the clarity that followed. She remembered how her body felt when she chose herself. That memory steadied her. Resolve did not arrive as confidence. It arrived as direction. She scheduled her first appointment and kept it private. She sat in waiting rooms without distraction, breathing through uncertainty. She asked questions clearly. She took notes. She learned. Each step replaced panic with structure. Eloian began to think in terms of safety. What would protect this child? What would teach them strength without bitterness? What would model courage without noise? Fear shifted again. It became vigilance, not a burden. A guide. She set boundaries early. She limited who knew. She guarded her time. She protected her energy. Every decision filtered through a single question. Does this preserve calm? As weeks passed, resolve strengthened. It showed up in routine, in meals prepared with care, in rest taken without guilt, in plans built slowly, intentionally. Eloian did not romanticize the road ahead. She respected it. She recognized that resolve does not require certainty. It requires commitment, a willingness to move forward without permission or applause. The fear did not vanish. It learned its place. By choosing resolve, Eloian reframed her situation. This was not a consequence to endure. This was a responsibility to honor. She felt steadier than she had in years, not because everything was clear, because her purpose was. The decision formed long before Eloian spoke it out loud. It settled during quiet mornings when she moved more slowly, during evenings when she sat with her hands resting still, aware of change happening beneath the surface. Protection became instinct before it became language. She thought about the kind of world her children would enter, about what they would learn from watching her choices, about the lessons that form long before words are understood. Eloian knew one thing with certainty. Her children would never learn that love required endurance of harm. They would never watch their mother wait in silence for defense that did not come. That understanding shaped everything. She decided there would be no messages sent, no explanations offered, no reopening of doors she closed with clarity. The past would not reach into the future she was building. This was not punishment. It was prevention. Eloian imagined her children asking questions one day. She wanted answers that came from strength, not resentment, from truth, not bitterness. She chose to protect their sense of safety first, their sense of worth, their understanding of boundaries. Protection meant more than distance. It meant structure, stability, predictability. She began shaping her life around rhythms that supported growth rather than reaction. She prepared quietly. Financial planning, healthcare decisions, education options she did not yet need but wanted ready. Each step reinforced control over her path. There were moments when doubt surfaced, when sharing the responsibility felt tempting, when old familiarity tugged at her resolve. She returned to the same truth every time. Protection is not shared with those who fail to offer it when it mattered. Eloian did not frame her choice as sacrifice. She framed it as leadership. Someone had to choose consistency. Someone had to model courage without waiting for validation. She chose to be that person. In protecting her children, she also protected herself. She refused to repeat patterns that taught silence as loyalty. She refused to let history shape their future. The decision settled fully then. Her children would grow in a space where dignity was normal, where calm was not earned through compliance, where love did not arrive late. That was the life she would build. There were moments when Eloian remembered what she left behind. Not the rooms, not the status, the ease money brings when problems appear, the access, the certainty that comes with resources others never touch. She acknowledged those memories without letting them guide her. Wealth had offered comfort, but it demanded compromise she would no longer make. It softened consequences while asking her to tolerate what felt wrong. Calm asked for discipline, but it returned peace without condition. Eloian chose the latter. Her life now moved at a quieter pace. Expenses stayed measured. Decisions stayed deliberate. She learned the difference between enough and excess, and she found strength in knowing where that line lived. She budgeted carefully. She planned ahead. She refused panic spending or future bargaining. Every choice reinforced stability rather than image. There were no luxury distractions, no appearances to maintain, no pressure to keep up. The simplicity grounded her. She realized how much noise wealth carried, how often it masked imbalance, how easily it excused silence. Calm, on the other hand, required honesty. It demanded presence. It asked her to face uncertainty without insulation. Eloian embraced that. She structured her days around what mattered: health, rest, work completed with care, evenings spent in stillness. Her body responded. Her mind cleared. She stopped measuring success by access and started measuring it by alignment. Did her choices protect her children? Did they preserve her sense of self? Did they allow her to sleep without tension? The answer mattered more than numbers. There were no dramatic declarations, no moment where she rejected wealth outright. She simply stopped chasing what no longer served her. Calm became her priority, not as retreat, as foundation. In choosing calm, Eloian chose longevity. She chose clarity. She chose a future built on values she could defend without explanation. Walking away had cost her comfort. It gave her peace. And peace, once claimed, proved worth more than anything she left behind. 4 years reshaped Eloian's life through quiet repetition. She woke before dawn most days, not from pressure, but from habits shaped by 2 small lives that depended on rhythm. The twins arrived minutes apart, different cries, different weights, different needs from the very beginning. Eloian learned them separately. One calmed with sound, the other needed stillness. One slept easily, the other resisted rest until held. She adapted without complaint, guided by instinct sharpened through responsibility. Motherhood did not overwhelm her. It focused her. Her days followed gentle structure. Mornings began with preparation and care. Afternoons moved slower, shaped around naps and soft play. Evenings brought routines that created certainty. Baths, stories, quiet music. Lights dimmed at the same time each night. The twins grew within that consistency. Eloian balanced work between moments. She adjusted her schedule to fit their needs, not the other way around. Productivity became precise. Focus sharpened. She learned to value efficiency without urgency. There was no excess in their home. Toys were chosen carefully. Meals were simple and nourishing. Time mattered more than objects. Eloian paid attention to emotional safety as much as physical care. She spoke gently. She explained transitions. She responded to fear without dismissal. The twins learned early that their needs would be met without negotiation. She did not tell them stories about the past. There was no bitterness in her tone when she spoke about life before them. She believed children deserved peace, not inheritance of conflict. Raising them alone demanded stamina. There were nights of exhaustion, days when worry surfaced quietly. She allowed herself those moments without guilt. Then she steadied herself and continued. Eloian did not see herself as sacrificing. She saw herself as building. Each choice reinforced the environment she wanted her children to know. 4 years passed through diapers, first steps, first words, through scraped knees and laughter that filled rooms meant to be calm. She watched the twins grow secure in ways she once had to learn as an adult. That was the quiet reward. Not recognition, not ease, but knowing they were safe. The home Eloian built did not impress on sight. It reassured. Nothing inside it existed to prove status. Everything existed to support steadiness. The twins learned this language early, not through instruction, but through repetition. Mornings followed the same gentle pattern. Breakfast at the table, sunlight through the same window, small conversations about plans for the day, even before the children fully understood words. Eloian believed familiarity created safety long before logic did. Transitions were explained, never rushed. If they were leaving the house, she told them where they were going. If plans changed, she named the change calmly. The twins learned trust through predictability. Warmth lived in details. Clean clothes folded the same way each time. Notes tucked into lunch containers once school began. Hugs given freely, never withheld as discipline. Eloian did not raise her voice often. When correction was needed, she knelt to their level and spoke clearly. She believed calm authority lasted longer than fear. Evenings carried ritual. Dinner together, even on busy days, devices away. Stories read slowly, with pauses for questions and laughter. The twins knew bedtime was not abandonment. It was part of care. Safety showed up in how Eloian responded to emotion. Tears were met with patience. Anger was guided, not punished. Curiosity was encouraged. Silence was never used as consequence. The twins learned early that home was not a place of guessing. They did not watch for moods. They did not measure words. They existed freely. That freedom shaped their confidence. When storms came, Eloian stayed close. When illness arrived, she stayed present. When fear surfaced, she stayed steady. She did not teach resilience through hardship alone. She taught it through reliability. Warmth was not loud. It did not require performance. It showed up daily, consistently, without condition. Aloian knew wealth could buy comfort. She also knew safety could not be purchased. It had to be built. 4 years of routine did more than structure days. They shaped trust. They taught the twins that love did not shift with circumstance. That care did not arrive late. That peace did not need negotiation. This was the life Aloian chose. Not dramatic, not perfect, but secure. The twins did not grow as reflections of each other. From the start, they carried different rhythms, different ways of meeting the world. Aloian noticed it early and honored it without comparison. Arlen moved with curiosity first. He asked questions before he finished listening to answers. His attention jumped easily, pulled by sound, movement, possibility. He liked to build things, then take them apart just to see how they worked. When something failed, he tried again without frustration, convinced effort would eventually make sense. Sable watched before acting. She absorbed rooms quietly, studying faces and tones. When she spoke, her words were careful and precise. She noticed details others missed. A change in routine, a pause in a sentence. She carried empathy naturally, often checking on others before being asked. Aloian adapted her parenting to both. With Arlen, she guided focus gently, helping him slow down without dimming his energy. With Sable, she encouraged expression, inviting her to speak even when silence felt easier. She never labeled one as easier than the other. She never framed differences as strengths or weaknesses. She treated them as identities unfolding. The twins interacted with each other with ease shaped by security. Disagreements happened, but they resolved quickly. They did not compete for attention. They trusted there was enough. Arlen often led games. Sable often shaped them. Together, they created balance without knowing it. Aloian paid close attention to how they reacted to stress. When Arlen became restless, she offered structure. When Sable withdrew, she offered closeness. She did not force sameness. She supported individuality. As they grew, traces of their father appeared in small ways. The intensity of Arlen's focus, the seriousness in Sable's gaze. Aloian noticed without alarm. She did not fear resemblance. She trusted environment. The twins learned confidence through consistency. They learned curiosity without fear. They learned calm as default, not reward. Aloian watched them become themselves with quiet pride. Not because they were exceptional, because they were secure. Their personalities flourished because they were not shaped by tension. They were shaped by safety. 4 years passed like this. Growth without pressure. Identity without negotiation. This was peace in motion. Matthew's world expanded the way it always had. Companies grew. Markets opened. His name appeared in rooms where decisions carried weight. People sought his approval. Contracts closed quickly when he spoke. From the outside, his life looked complete. Inside, something stayed unfinished. He moved through days with efficiency. Meetings began on time. Schedules filled easily. Yet when the workday ended, silence waited. Not the kind that rests, the kind that exposes. Homes he owned felt temporary, carefully designed, rarely lived in. He spent more nights in hotels than in any one place long enough to call it familiar. Success followed him without effort. Satisfaction did not. Matthew told himself this was the cost of ambition. That fulfillment would arrive later, after the next milestone. He believed momentum would eventually quiet the unease he felt when rooms emptied. It never did. He avoided returning to the apartment where memories lingered. He told himself it was practical. He told himself space helped. What it truly did was delay reflection. His mother remained present, unchanged. Her approval stayed conditional. Her standards stayed fixed. She never revisited that night. She never offered explanation. She never apologized. Matthew did not ask her to. At work, he commanded respect. At home, he avoided discomfort. The contrast grew harder to ignore. People praised his discipline, his restraint, his ability to stay calm under pressure. They did not see how often calm replaced connection. Evenings stretched long. He scrolled through messages without responding. He filled time with tasks that required nothing emotional. There were moments when he thought of Eloian, not the argument, not the departure, the quiet routines they once shared, the warmth that required no effort. He wondered when success stopped feeling like progress and started feeling like motion without meaning. He told himself everything had a season. That life balanced itself eventually. Yet each year passed without balance returning. Matthew had achieved what many chase: influence, stability, recognition. What he lacked was presence. What he avoided was accountability. Power surrounded him. Peace did not. And the absence of both grew louder in the quiet spaces where no one needed anything from him. Matthew tried to move on. He told himself distance required replacement. That connection could be rebuilt through new beginnings. He accepted introductions. He went on dates arranged by friends who believed time healed everything. The relationships followed a pattern. They started easily. Polite interest. Controlled charm. He listened well enough to seem present. He paid attention without offering depth. People mistook his calm for security. It never lasted. Partners sensed the barrier quickly. Conversations stayed surface level. Intimacy stalled before it settled. When questions turned personal, Matthew deflected with work, humor, or silence. He told himself he needed time. He told himself caution was wise. What he avoided was exposure. When conflict appeared, even in small forms, Matthew withdrew. He believed stepping back prevented harm. In truth, it prevented connection. His pattern repeated quietly, familiar and unchallenged. Some relationships ended gently, others ended abruptly. The reason was always the same, even when no one named it. He was present, without protection, available without depth. People noticed how often he avoided choosing sides, how he listened without anchoring, how he valued peace over clarity. They left without drama. Matthew told himself the matches were wrong, that the timing was off, that expectations were unreasonable. He never considered the common element. Each ending added to a quiet tally, not of loss, but of avoidance. He filled the gaps with work, travel, commitments that asked nothing emotional. He stayed productive because productivity felt safe. At night, he replayed conversations he should have engaged more fully, moments where silence cost more than speaking ever would have. He recognized the pattern without confronting it. Relationships require risk. Risk requires presence. Matthew offered structure instead. The failed connections did not break him. They informed him. Each one highlighted what he refused to examine. Each one mirrored the same absence that ended his marriage. He began to understand something uncomfortable. It was not love that left him. It was avoidance. And avoidance, when practiced long enough, builds a life that looks full from the outside and empty when the door closes. Marceline Finn never revisited that night. Not in private, not in passing, not through implication or softened language. She carried on as though the moment had resolved itself through time alone. To her, silence meant closure. She spoke of Eloian rarely, and when she did, it was with controlled distance. No regret shaped her tone. No reflection softened her words. She framed the past as necessity, not harm. Matthew noticed this more as years passed. When he visited his mother, the house remained ordered and unchanged. The same routines, the same standards, the same expectations placed neatly where accountability should have been. Marceline spoke often about family loyalty, about strength, about preserving order. She praised restraint as virtue. She never acknowledged how restraint can excuse damage. Matthew waited for an opening that never came. He did not press her. He did not challenge her framing. He told himself pushing would accomplish nothing. That understanding did not require agreement. What he avoided was the discomfort of naming the truth. Marceline's refusal to apologize was not loud. It did not provoke argument. It settled quietly, reinforced by years of authority that went unquestioned. Matthew realized how much power that silence carried, how easily it shaped narrative, how absence of remorse suggested correctness. He noticed how often his mother spoke of Eloian as someone who failed to adapt, as someone who left rather than endure. The implication was clear. Endurance, in her view, proved worth. Matthew did not counter her. He let the words pass, even when they tightened his chest. Habit kept him still. Yet with time, her refusal to revisit the past began to feel heavier than anger would have. Anger acknowledges impact. Silence denies it. Matthew understood something difficult. Without apology, healing stalled. Without recognition, repair remained impossible. His mother's authority depended on never questioning herself, and his complicity depended on allowing it. The realization did not change Marceline. It changed Matthew. For the first time, he saw clearly how much silence had cost him. How often he learned to accept harm as tradition. Marceline never apologized, and in that refusal, Matthew finally saw the pattern he had inherited. Power filled Matthew's life, but it did not accompany him. He walked into rooms where people stood when he entered. His opinion shaped outcomes. His presence commanded attention. Yet when the doors closed, the authority stayed behind. What remained was quiet. Not rest, not peace. Absence. Evenings stretched without anchor. There were no small voices filling rooms. No routines waiting to be honored. No one asking when he would be home. He ate meals alone more often than not. He worked late because there was nothing to return to. He told himself solitude sharpened focus. What it sharpened was awareness. Loneliness did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated. It showed up in empty calendars on weekends, in holidays treated as obligations rather than gatherings, in moments of success with no one to share them with. Matthew began to understand how little power means without connection. Influence impresses crowds. Presence sustains families. He thought of Eloian's life sometimes, not through access or surveillance, through memory. He imagined warmth, routine, stability. The contrast grew harder to ignore. His life moved fast. Her life moved meaningfully. He had authority. She had peace. The realization did not arrive as regret alone. It arrived as instruction. Power without family feels hollow. Success without connection leaves no legacy worth carrying forward. Matthew did not yet know how the divide between them would close. He did not yet understand what accountability would demand, but he recognized the truth clearly. Everything he built stood tall. Nothing he built felt complete. Before we move on, let me ask you something. What does success mean without family? What does achievement offer when there is no one to share it with? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this story speaks to you, stay with us. Because what comes next challenges everything Matthew thought he understood about loss, responsibility, and repair. The cafe sat near the water, unremarkable and easy to miss. Matthew entered without expectation. He had finished a meeting early and chose the place for convenience, not sentiment. The smell of coffee greeted him first. Warm, familiar, comforting in a way he rarely allowed himself to notice. He stepped inside, ordered quickly, and moved toward the counter to wait. Then the room shifted, not through sound, through presence. Eloian stood a few steps away, angled slightly toward the window, sunlight brushing her hair. She wore no sign of the life she once lived beside him. No polished distance, no guarded performance, just calm certainty in the way she held herself. For a brief moment, Matthew believed his mind was filling space with memory. Then she turned. Their eyes met. Time did not rush. It narrowed. The cafe continued around them. Cups clinked. Voices murmured. Chairs moved. None of it reached him. His attention fixed fully on her face, searching for signs of change. She looked steady, grounded, whole, not surprised, not unsettled. Matthew's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words failed him, not from fear, but from recognition. She had not faded. She had grown. Eloian held his gaze without hostility, without warmth, without apology. Her expression carried awareness, not invitation. This was not reunion shaped by longing. It was collision shaped by truth. Matthew took a half step forward, then stopped. He recognized the boundary before she spoke it. Years had passed, but the rules were clear. He was the unexpected one here. The silence between them stretched, not heavy, but deliberate. It asked for honesty without promising comfort. Eloian broke it first. Matthew, she said calmly. His name sounded different in her voice now. Not softer, clearer. He nodded once, unable to offer more. The weight of what he had not said 4 years earlier pressed against his throat. This was not the moment he rehearsed in regret. This was not the confrontation he feared. This was something quieter, and somehow far more demanding. Recognition arrived before logic could soften it. Matthew took in Eloian slowly, as if his eyes needed time to catch up with reality. The lines of her face had not hardened. They had settled. There was ease in her posture he had never given her space to hold before. She stood the way people stand when they are no longer bracing. His mind rushed ahead, then stalled. Questions formed without finding order. How long had she been here? Why now? Why here of all places? He saw no trace of the woman who once waited for him to speak. No hesitation, no searching glance. She did not ask permission to exist in the space between them. That was the shock, not her presence. Her independence from his reaction. Matthew realized then how much he expected grief to leave a mark, how he assumed absence would dull her. He had prepared himself to see distance shaped by hurt. Instead, he saw someone who had outgrown the moment he stayed seated. The recognition stung. It forced him to confront a truth he kept at a safe distance for years. Leaving did not weaken her. Silence did not define her. The life she built did not pause for his regret. She spoke again, simple and direct. "I didn't expect to see you here." He nodded. "Neither did I." The words felt insufficient, but they were honest. Matthew noticed how the cafe reflected off the glass behind her, how the light framed her without effort. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she stood. He searched her eyes for anger. He found none. That absence unsettled him more than blame ever could. Anger demands response. Calm demands accountability. Matthew felt the weight of time then. 4 years compressed into a single awareness. Missed explanations. Unasked questions. A truth delayed long enough to change its shape. He wanted to apologize. The words rose quickly, familiar and rehearsed. He stopped himself. Apologies without understanding repeat the harm they claim to heal. Eloian did not move closer. She did not step away. She held the space steady, allowing him to meet the moment without cushioning it. Recognition settled fully. This was not a second chance waiting to be requested. This was a reckoning arriving on its own terms. And Matthew understood, with painful clarity, that whatever came next would not be guided by what he wanted. It would be guided by what he owed. The moment broke not through words, but through sound. 2 voices cut through the quiet rhythm of the cafe, light and certain. "Mom." Matthew turned instinctively toward the sound. 2 children moved fast across the floor, small shoes tapping without hesitation. One reached her first, fingers closing around Eloian's hand with familiarity. The other pressed close to her leg, steady and unafraid. Eloian's posture shifted at once, not in alarm, in welcome. Her face softened in a way Matthew had never seen before. The calm he noticed earlier deepened into warmth, private and complete. She bent slightly, one hand resting on a small shoulder, the other, brushing hair back with ease, practiced through years of repetition. "Give me 1 second," she said gently. The words were not a request. They were assurance. The twins stayed close, glancing up at her, then at Matthew. Their eyes held curiosity, not caution. They were used to being safe. Matthew felt his chest tighten. The children looked familiar in ways he could not immediately place. A seriousness in the gaze, a shared structure in their features. The resemblance arrived before the thought did. One of them tilted their head slightly. "Who's that?" Eloian answered without pause. "Someone I used to know." Her voice carried no tension, no edge, only truth delivered at the level the moment required. Matthew stood still, watching as reality assembled itself piece by piece. The height, the timing, the age. 4 years. His breath caught as the understanding formed fully. Not as shock, as certainty. The twins shifted closer to Eloian, instinctively anchoring themselves to her presence. One leaned against her, the other held her hand tighter. Matthew realized something essential in that instant. These children had not learned caution around adults. They had not learned to read rooms for safety. They trusted the space they occupied. That trust had been built deliberately. Eloian looked at him then, not to explain, not to defend, to acknowledge that the truth had arrived. "They're yours," she said simply. The words did not accuse. They did not invite. They stated fact. Matthew felt the ground change beneath him. Identity realigned in a single breath. He was no longer only a man who failed to stand. He was a father who had not been present. The twins watched him closely now, curious but unafraid. Their calm made the moment heavier than chaos ever could. Truth had arrived, and there was no avoiding it. The truth did not arrive as noise. It settled. Matthew remained where he was, his body still, his thoughts moving faster than he could organize. The cafe felt suddenly smaller, not because of crowd or sound, but because every assumption he carried had been corrected at once. He looked at the twins again, this time not as children in a room, but as mirrors reflecting a life he never entered. The timing aligned with painful precision. 4 years, no margin, no doubt. He did not ask questions. He did not challenge the reality forming in front of him. He had avoided the truth long enough to recognize it instantly when it stood upright. His throat tightened. He swallowed, steadying himself. This was not a moment for collapse. It was a moment for clarity. He noticed details he had missed seconds earlier. The way one child stood slightly ahead, curious and alert. The way the other stayed closer, observant and measured. He saw traces of himself without ownership attached. Fatherhood did not feel like entitlement. It felt like responsibility delayed. Matthew understood something crucial then. Eloian had not hidden this to punish him. She had protected something fragile from a man who once stayed seated when protection mattered. That realization cut deeper than any accusation could have. He met her eyes again. She did not look triumphant. She did not look defensive. She looked resolved. "I didn't know," he said quietly. Eloian nodded once. "I know." The exchange held weight without explanation. It acknowledged history without reopening it. Matthew wanted to reach for the children. The instinct came quickly, then stopped. He recognized the boundary without needing it named. Presence would have to be earned, not assumed. He took a breath and let it out slowly. "I should have stood," he said. It was not a full apology. It was recognition. Eloian listened without interrupting. The twins watched both of them, sensing seriousness without fear. Matthew felt something settle in place. Regret shifted into purpose. The truth did not ask him to defend himself. It asked him to become accountable. This was not about reclaiming the past. It was about responding correctly to the present. And for the first time since that night 4 years earlier, Matthew understood what was being asked of him. Not explanation, not authority, honesty. They did not sit down right away. Eloian suggested a short walk instead, just outside the cafe, where the twins could see the water and stay close. There was no secrecy in the choice, only care. Matthew followed a step behind, attentive, measured. He matched her pace without comment. The twins moved between them, pointing toward boats, asking simple questions, unaware of the weight shifting behind their curiosity. When they reached a bench near the railing, Eloian paused. She knelt to the twins' level. "I need to talk for a few minutes," she said gently. "You can stay right here." They nodded easily. One leaned against her shoulder. The other traced patterns on the bench with a finger. Eloian stood and turned to Matthew. This was not a confrontation. It was an exchange. They spoke quietly, close enough to be heard, far enough to give the children space. Matthew did not rush. He did not lead with explanation. He spoke plainly. "I failed you," he said. "I chose quiet when I should have chosen you." The words landed without defense attached. No justification followed. No attempt to soften the truth. Eloian listened. Her face stayed open, not guarded. She did not interrupt. She did not correct his phrasing. She allowed him to finish because this moment required completion, not control. "I won't ask for forgiveness," Matthew continued. "I won't ask for anything today." That restraint mattered. Eloian nodded once. "Thank you for not asking." They stood in silence for a moment, letting the words settle. The water moved steadily behind them, unbothered by human timing. "I didn't leave to punish you," Eloian said. "I left to protect myself." "I see that now," Matthew replied. The conversation stayed anchored in truth. No raised voices, no rehearsed grievances, no attempts to rewrite history. They named what happened. They acknowledged what was lost. They accepted what could not be undone. Matthew asked one question only. What do the children need from me right now? Eloian considered him carefully before answering. Consistency, she said. And respect for boundaries. He nodded. I can do that. This was not reconciliation. It was alignment. The first conversation did not heal everything. It did not promise outcome. It established something more important. Trust in process. There was no release through volume. No raised voices. No accusations sharpened by time. What passed between them stayed measured, deliberate, and clear. The absence of shouting did not weaken the moment. It strengthened it. They spoke as people who understood the cost of noise. Matthew did not argue memory. He did not contest perception. He did not claim misunderstanding. He accepted the version of events as Eloian experienced them, without adjusting language to ease himself. That choice changed the tone entirely. Eloian did not relive details to punish him. She did not catalog hurt. She stated facts where clarity mattered, and let silence carry the rest. I waited, she said simply. That's what mattered. Matthew nodded. He did not ask how long. He knew. They acknowledged the reality between them, without attempting to control the outcome. Each sentence served purpose. Nothing reached for comfort it had not earned. Matthew admitted what he avoided for years, that he confused restraint with wisdom, that he believed stillness prevented damage, that he did not understand how silence communicates alignment with harm. Eloian confirmed what she learned that night. That love without defense leaves a person unprotected. That patience cannot replace choice. That dignity cannot survive where safety depends on hope. There was relief in saying these things without resistance. Truth, when received fully, does not escalate. It settles. The twins remained nearby, absorbed in their own quiet world. Eloian checked on them often, her attention never fully leaving them. Matthew noticed that. He respected it. No promises were made. No timelines suggested. No future drawn prematurely. They ended the conversation the same way it began. Calm. Direct. Complete. Matthew asked if he could see the twins again. Not today. Not tomorrow. When appropriate. Eloian considered him carefully. We'll talk, she said. It was not dismissal. It was honesty. They parted without ceremony. No lingering touch. No false warmth. Only acknowledgement of what had occurred. As Matthew watched Eloian walk away with the twins, he understood something that had taken years to reach him. Truth does not arrive when invited. It arrives when readiness meets consequence. And once it arrives, it changes the ground permanently. When Eloian walked away with the twins, the cafe did not feel ordinary anymore. Matthew stayed where he was for a moment longer, watching the space they had occupied return to normal. Chairs scraped softly. Cups were cleared. Conversations resumed. Life moved on as if nothing irreversible had occurred. For him, everything had. Identity settled into a new shape. He was no longer only a man defined by ambition and restraint. He was a father whose absence carried consequence. A husband whose silence carried cost. A son who inherited patterns he never questioned. The stakes stood clear. Fatherhood was not a title he could claim. It was a responsibility he would have to earn through action, consistency, and humility. Access would not be automatic. Trust would not be rushed. Presence would be measured over time. Accountability was no longer abstract. It required patience. It required restraint. It required accepting limits he did not set. Eloian felt the weight differently. She walked beside the twins, aware of how much ground she had covered to reach this steadiness. The truth had arrived, but it did not destabilize her. It confirmed what she already built. Her life did not pause for reckoning. It held space for it. The twins chatted easily as they moved, unburdened by the gravity behind the moment. Their security reminded Eloian why boundaries mattered, why clarity mattered, why protection came before reconciliation. This reunion did not promise reunion of hearts. It promised alignment with truth. And truth, once acknowledged, demands response. The lesson stood plain. You cannot outrun what you refuse to face. You cannot avoid truth forever. It arrives when silence no longer shields you. Matthew understood now that the past would not be corrected through regret alone, only through changed behavior. only through choosing differently when moments tested him again. Eloian understood something equally important. Walking away had not closed the door to truth. It created the conditions for it to arrive without distortion. This chapter did not end with resolution. It ended with clarity. And clarity, once gained, becomes the starting point for everything that follows. Matthew did not rush his apology. He understood now that speed often served the one speaking, not the one receiving. So he waited until the moment required no persuasion, no setup, no softened framing. When he spoke, it was without witnesses and without expectation. "I failed you," he said plainly. "I failed to protect you when it mattered. I failed to choose you when choosing felt uncomfortable." He did not add explanations. He did not reference stress, tradition, or intention. He did not list regrets as proof of growth. He stayed with the truth as it stood. Eloian listened without interrupting. Honest apologies do not demand response. They offer recognition and accept whatever follows. Matthew understood that now. "I stayed silent," he continued. "And my silence caused harm. I see that clearly." The words did not ask for forgiveness. They acknowledged impact. That difference mattered. Eloian took a moment before responding. She did not reward the apology with relief or closeness. She received it with composure. "Thank you for naming it," she said. "That's where repair starts." Her tone was steady, not warm, not cold. Honest. Matthew noticed how much effort it took him not to ask if this changed anything. He resisted the urge to measure progress through outcome. Repair was not a transaction. Apology, he learned, is not closure. It is responsibility accepted. He apologized again later, not because the first was insufficient, but because consistency mattered. Each time the language stayed the same. Direct, unembellished, complete. Eloian did not soften immediately. She did not reopen doors. She did not revisit the past to test his remorse. She allowed the apology to exist without attaching reward. That restraint shaped the space between them. For the first time, Matthew felt the weight of patience without resentment. He stayed present without pushing. He learned that apologies do not erase harm. They acknowledge it so something healthier can be built. Eloian recognized the difference too. This apology did not arrive to relieve guilt. It arrived to accept consequence. That was new. And in that honesty, without urgency or demand, the first foundation of repair took shape. Matthew learned quickly that restraint mattered more than intent. After the apology, he did not suggest next steps. He did not ask where this left them. He did not reference the past as shared ground that required rebuilding. He allowed the space to remain undefined. That choice surprised Eloian. She had prepared herself for negotiation, for emotional urgency dressed as accountability, for subtle pressure framed as hope. None of it came. Matthew did not ask to come back into her life. He did not speak about reconciliation. He did not hint at what he wanted the future to look like. Instead, he asked one question. "What pace feels right for you?" The question carried no leverage. It did not assume outcome. It acknowledged control where it belonged. Eloian answered honestly. "I don't know yet," she said. "And I need to not know without being rushed." Matthew accepted that without visible disappointment. He nodded, signaling understanding rather than endurance. "No pressure," he said. "I'll follow your lead." Those words held meaning only because his behavior matched them. Days passed without messages checking in on progress. Weeks followed without reminders of shared history. When they spoke, it was intentional, brief, grounded, focused on the present, not potential. Matthew learned to manage his own expectations privately. He did not place them on Eloian. He recognized that wanting something did not grant access to it. Eloian noticed the absence of pursuit. It allowed her nervous system to stay calm. It gave her room to observe without defending. It reinforced that any movement forward would come from choice, not persuasion. The lack of pressure became proof. Repair that demands outcome is not repair. It is negotiation. Matthew avoided that trap consciously, even when silence felt heavy. He did not interpret boundaries as rejection. He treated them as instruction. For Eloian, this mattered more than words. She had lived in a space where calm depended on compliance. Now, calm existed without concession. The distance between them held purpose. It protected clarity. It allowed trust to grow without urgency. No reunion was promised. No future was assumed. What existed was permission to move slowly without penalty. That slowness did not stall progress. It made it possible. Presence did not return through promises. It returned through repetition. Matthew showed up when he said he would. Not early to impress. Not late to excuse. On time, consistently, without announcement. He treated reliability as obligation, not favor. He listened more than he spoke. When Eloian set boundaries, he accepted them without argument. When plans changed, he adapted without complaint. He learned quickly that trust responds to patterns, not statements. He began with small things. Short visits scheduled in advance. Public places chosen for comfort. Conversations focused on logistics rather than emotion. He resisted the urge to explain himself unless asked. He let silence exist without filling it. Presence, he learned, is not proximity. It is attention without demand. When he spent time with the twins, he followed Eloian's routines precisely. He asked what they liked, what unsettled them, what calmed them. He did not improvise. He did not assert authority he had not earned. He observed. He noticed how Eloian spoke to them, how she knelt to their level, how she named feelings without amplifying them. He mirrored her tone, understanding that continuity mattered more than individuality. When mistakes happened, he owned them immediately. No defensiveness, no explanation layered over apology. He corrected behavior without asking for reassurance. Eloian watched all of this carefully. She did not praise effort. She noted consistency. She did not test him. She let time do the work. Matthew learned that presence required patience even when nothing seemed to move. He stayed steady through quiet stretches, understanding that reliability is measured when attention is not rewarded. He stopped measuring progress through closeness. He measured it through permission. When Eloian invited him to stay longer one afternoon, he recognized it as trust offered, not earned all at once. He did not push it further. He thanked her and left when planned. That restraint mattered. Earning presence meant releasing urgency. It meant choosing predictability over intensity. It meant understanding that showing up without pressure was the work. Slowly, the space between them changed. Not warmer, clearer. Eloian began to expect him where he said he would be. The twins began to include him naturally, without prompting. The structure held. Matthew understood something essential. Presence is not proven by grand moments. It is proven by showing up the same way, every time. Fatherhood did not arrive from Matthew as instinct. It arrived as education. He did not assume knowledge. He asked questions. He listened to answers without reshaping them to suit himself. He accepted correction without pride. He learned the twins as individuals, not extensions of his identity. Arlen responded to movement and exploration. Sable responded to tone and intention. Matthew adjusted accordingly. He did not force connection through excitement. He allowed it to form through attention. He followed routines exactly. Snack times, reading order, bedtime signals. He learned that structure did not restrict children. It anchored them. When Arlen grew restless, Matthew redirected energy instead of suppressing it. When Sable grew quiet, he offered space without withdrawal. He learned to notice emotional shifts early, before they escalated. Mistakes happened. He forgot a preference. He misread a moment. Each time he corrected course without defensiveness. He apologized to the children directly, modeling accountability without weight. Eloian watched this closely. She did not step in unless necessary. She allowed Matthew to build competence through experience. She noticed how carefully he mirrored language and tone, how he asked before acting, how he deferred when unsure. Fatherhood taught Matthew restraint. He learned that presence required humility. That authority came after trust. That children did not need perfection. They needed consistency and repair. He stopped trying to impress them. He focused on being reliable. Over time, the twins responded. Arlen began pulling Matthew into play without hesitation. Sable began asking questions directly, testing whether curiosity would be met with patience. Each interaction built familiarity. Matthew felt the shift without claiming it. He understood now that fatherhood was not about reclaiming time lost. It was about honoring the time offered. He did not ask Eloian if he was doing well. He let behavior answer the question. Learning fatherhood reshaped him quietly. It slowed his speech. It softened his posture. It sharpened his awareness. He began to understand something deeper. Being a father was not about correction. It was about attunement, and attunement required showing up fully, without expectation of reward. Respect returned before anything else. It did not arrive as comfort or closeness. It arrived as recognition. Elohim began to see Matthew not as the man who stayed seated, but as the man choosing differently now. That distinction mattered. Respect grew through observation, through how he handled moments when no one praised him, through how he accepted limits without protest, through how he corrected himself without being asked. Elohim noticed how he deferred to her decisions without resentment, how he asked before changing routines, how he checked in rather than assumed. She did not interpret this as submission. She recognized it as accountability. Matthew stopped trying to earn approval. He focused on alignment. His behavior showed that he understood where authority lived and why. Respect deepened in practical ways. Elohim trusted him with small responsibilities, school pickups, short outings, shared planning. Each extension came with clarity, and Matthew honored it without testing boundaries. When disagreements arose, they addressed them calmly. Matthew did not withdraw. He did not defend instinctively. He stayed present, listened fully, and adjusted when needed. That consistency changed the tone between them. Respect does not require agreement, it requires acknowledgement. Elohim felt acknowledged in ways she had not before. Her voice carried weight without negotiation. Matthew learned that respect is built through restraint as much as action, through knowing when to step forward and when to step back. The twins felt the shift too. They saw cooperation rather than tension. They watched adults handle difference without conflict. They learned that authority could coexist with humility. Respect stabilized the dynamic before affection entered it. There was no rush to define what this meant for the future. Respect was not a promise. It was a condition. Elohim allowed herself to trust the process without surrendering control. She recognized the strength in maintaining standards without closing doors. Matthew accepted that respect was not permanent. It required maintenance, attention, consistency. For the first time, their connection did not rest on hope, it rested on behavior. And in that foundation, something healthier than reconciliation began to take shape. Affection did not return with a single moment. It emerged through accumulation. A glance held a second longer than necessary. A shared smile during a small success. A quiet understanding exchanged without words. None of it demanded attention. All of it mattered. Elohim noticed the change first in herself. She did not brace when Matthew entered a room. She did not measure his tone for risk. Her body remained at ease, a signal she trusted more than thought. Matthew did not reach for closeness. He allowed it to approach on its own terms. When she laughed, he received it without reaching. When she spoke softly, he listened without leaning in. Affection grows best when it is not chased. Their interactions softened. Conversations stretched beyond logistics into reflection. They spoke about the twins with shared warmth. They discussed choices without tension. Silence between them felt comfortable, not charged. One evening, after the twins fell asleep, they sat across from each other at the table. No agenda, no planning, just presence. Elohim reached for her tea. Matthew passed the cup without comment. Their fingers brushed briefly. Neither reacted. The contact did not spark urgency. It confirmed safety. Affection showed up in trust. In the way Elohim allowed Matthew to take the lead sometimes. In the way Matthew accepted guidance without resistance. In the way they checked in with each other before decisions that affected the children. There was no rewriting of history. No attempt to replace what was lost. What grew now was different. Slower. Clearer. Elohim remained attentive to her boundaries. She did not collapse them in response to comfort. Matthew respected that, understanding that affection earned does not override standards set. He did not interpret slowness as hesitation. He understood it as care. The twins felt the shift without explanation. They moved easily between them. They sensed cooperation and ease. Their laughter filled spaces once held tight by memory. Affection returned as function, not fantasy. It appeared in how they moved through days together, in shared responsibility, in mutual regard, in patience extended without scorekeeping. Neither named it. They did not need to. What mattered was this. Affection did not come back because time passed. It returned because behavior changed. And because it grew without pressure, it carried weight. Real, earned, sustainable. Marceline chose her moment carefully. She did not arrive unannounced. She requested a meeting through formal channels, framed as concern rather than demand. Her message carried familiar language. Family matters. Stability. What was best for everyone involved. Matthew recognized the tone immediately. It was the same tone she used when decisions had already been made, when discussions served only to confirm her authority. Calm, polished, certain. Eloian read the message once and set it aside. She did not react with tension or curiosity. She understood what this was. Control seeking to reassert itself. Marceline's request focused on the children, on structure, on legacy. She suggested involvement framed as guidance, access framed as support, influence framed as responsibility. Nothing in the message acknowledged the past. Nothing referenced the harm done. The request assumed proximity without repair. Marceline did not ask Eloian how the children were doing. She asked how decisions were being made. She did not ask what support was needed. She outlined what should change. Eloian felt no anger reading it. She felt clarity. This was not concern for the children. This was discomfort with exclusion. Marceline had always believed family order required her oversight. The idea that life continued without her input unsettled her more than distance ever could. Matthew read the message differently than he once would have. He noticed what was missing. No apology, no accountability, no recognition of boundaries already established. The request treated time as eraser. It did not erase anything. Marceline followed up with a call. Her voice carried familiarity, not invitation. She spoke as though access would be negotiated, not earned. Matthew listened without interrupting. He allowed her to finish. For the first time, he did not translate her words into intention. He took them as they were. Control, reframed as care. The request placed him at a familiar crossroad, the one he avoided years ago, the one where choosing comfort over clarity felt easier. This time, the moment did not confuse him. It clarified him. Eloian did not respond immediately. She did not draft a careful reply. She did not seek advice. She did not weigh tone. The answer formed cleanly, without emotion clouding it. Refusal for her no longer required justification. When she spoke, it was direct and calm. "No," she said. "That won't work for us." The words held no sharpness. They did not invite debate. They stated boundary as fact. Marceline paused, surprised by the absence of explanation. She pressed gently, framing her request again in different language. Tradition, family connection, the importance of guidance. Eloian listened fully, then repeated herself. "My children are not open to management. Their lives are not a committee." There was no hostility in her tone. There was resolve. Eloian did not mention the past. She did not list reasons. She did not remind Marceline of harm done. She understood that boundaries lose strength when they are defended instead of enforced. She spoke of the present only. Our routines are stable. Our decisions are intentional. What we have works. Marceline responded with disbelief disguised as concern. She questioned Eloian's authority without naming it. She implied isolation. She implied risk. Eloian did not absorb the implication. She recognized the tactic. Control often frames resistance as irresponsibility. She refused to engage with that framing. "I'm not asking for approval," Eloian said. "I'm informing you of the boundary." Silence followed. Eloian felt steady, not shaken. This refusal did not feel confrontational. It felt necessary. Years earlier she would have softened. She would have explained. She would have adjusted to keep peace. She no longer needed peace built on compliance. The call ended without resolution. No agreement reached. No warmth exchanged. Eloian placed the phone down and returned to her day. The refusal did not linger in her thoughts. It did not cost her calm. That was the difference. She had learned that refusing access does not make a person unkind. It makes them responsible. Her children continued playing nearby, unaware of the exchange that protected their space. Aloian watched them for a moment and felt certainty deepen. Some doors stay closed because opening them would undo hard-won safety. This one would remain closed. Matthew did not delegate this moment. For years he had allowed difficult conversations to pass through others. Silence once felt safer than confrontation. This time, he chose presence. He called his mother himself. There was no preamble, no soft lead-in. He spoke clearly, with a steadiness shaped by everything he had learned since the cafe. "Things are different now," he said, "and I'm responsible for keeping them healthy." Marceline responded, as she always had. Calm, certain. She spoke of family order, of experience, of what she believed children needed. Matthew listened without interrupting. He let her finish. Then he set the boundary. "You don't have access without agreement," he said. "And agreement requires respect." The words were not raised. They were final. Marceline questioned him. She framed his stance as emotional. She suggested distance had confused priorities. She implied that her role was being diminished unfairly. Matthew did not argue the framing. "This isn't about roles," he replied. "It's about safety." There was a pause on the line. A pause filled with the kind of disbelief that follows loss of control. Matthew continued, "I won't allow pressure on Aloian. I won't allow interference with the children's routines, and I won't ignore the past to make this easier." He did not ask for understanding. He stated expectation. Marceline's voice tightened slightly. She reminded him of loyalty, of obligation, of all she had provided. Matthew acknowledged her contribution without surrendering ground. "I'm grateful for what you gave me," he said, "and I'm choosing differently now." The line went quiet again. This time the silence did not belong to him. Matthew felt the weight of the boundary settle, not as relief, as responsibility. Setting it did not erase history. It changed direction. When the call ended, there was no resolution offered, no apology received, no approval granted. Matthew did not seek any of those things. He had chosen clarity over comfort. Later, when he told Aloian what he had said, he did not embellish. He did not present it as victory. He shared it as fact. She listened, then nodded. "That's what choosing looks like," she said. Matthew understood then that boundaries are not about control. They are about protection, and protection requires consistency, not permission. He had finally stepped into the space he once avoided. This time, he stayed standing. Choosing his family did not arrive as a declaration. It arrived as alignment. Matthew adjusted his life without announcement. He shifted schedules to match school routines. He declined invitations that conflicted with family commitments. He stopped treating presence as something to fit in after obligations were met. This was not sacrifice. It was priority clarified. He made choices that once felt inconvenient and now felt necessary. Early mornings replaced late nights. Travel shortened. Decisions filtered through one question: does this protect what matters? He informed his team of boundaries without apology. He delegated differently. He accepted slower growth in exchange for stability at home. Power did not diminish because he stepped back. It refined. At home, he followed Aloian's lead without resistance. He supported routines rather than reshaping them. He reinforced consistency, understanding that trust grew strongest where predictability lived. The twins noticed the shift in ways children always do, through reliability, through attention that arrived without distraction, through presence that did not leave when things felt ordinary. Matthew did not perform fatherhood. He practiced it. He attended school events quietly. He learned teachers' names. He helped with homework without rushing. He listened to stories that seemed small and treated them as important. Choosing his family also meant choosing discomfort elsewhere. Marceline's distance increased. Approval withheld itself as consequence. Matthew accepted it without resentment. He understood that choosing one path often closes another. He did not seek validation for the choice. He recognized its cost and carried it willingly. Aloian observed all of this without commentary. She did not reward effort with praise. She noted alignment with calm attention. Choosing his family did not require dramatic gestures. It required consistency. Matthew learned that love expressed through routine carries weight beyond words. That children remember who showed up more than who promised. He stopped measuring success through expansion. He measured it through presence. This choice did not erase the past. It corrected direction. By choosing his family openly and repeatedly, Matthew demonstrated something he once failed to show. That protection, when chosen early and often, changes outcomes. Trust did not arrive with relief. It arrived with evidence. Eloian felt it in small moments that required no effort to notice. Matthew remembered details without reminders. He followed routines without prompting. He respected decisions even when they limited him. Trust grew because behavior stayed consistent when no one watched. Eloian stopped bracing for reversal. Her body relaxed in ways thought never could. She no longer anticipated explanations or defenses. She experienced predictability, and predictability settled her. Matthew did not test the trust forming. He did not ask for reassurance. He allowed time to confirm what words could not. When issues came up, he addressed them directly. When plans needed adjustment, he communicated early. When mistakes happened, he named them immediately and corrected course. Trust deepens where repair is prompt. Eloian noticed how the twins responded. They expected Matthew now. They planned around him. They asked for him without hesitation. Their confidence signaled safety more clearly than any conversation could. Trust solidified because Matthew accepted limits without resentment. He understood that boundaries protected stability. He treated them as structure, not restriction. Eloian extended trust carefully, then steadily. Short outings became longer ones. Shared decisions expanded. Responsibility increased without tension. Trust is built when control is not pursued. They spoke openly about expectations, not the future. The present, what worked, what did not. Adjustments followed without friction. There was no return to negotiation, no return to silence. The pattern had changed. Matthew understood something essential. Trust is not a reward for effort. It is a response to consistency. Once broken, it does not return through intent alone. Eloian understood something too. Trust does not require forgetting. It requires evidence that harm will not repeat. The past remained acknowledged. It did not dominate. Trust settled into place like a foundation reinforced after stress. Quiet, strong, unremarkable in appearance, essential in function. This was not blind trust. It was informed trust. And because it formed without pressure, it held. Happiness did not announce itself. It showed up in the way mornings unfolded without tension, in the way evenings ended without fatigue carried from unresolved conflict, in the way laughter moved through the house without hesitation. Quiet happiness settled in through routine. The twins thrived in the consistency. They moved freely between Eloian and Matthew, unburdened by uncertainty. Their days were filled with small joys that required no explanation. School stories, weekend plans, simple moments that accumulated into security. Eloian noticed the difference in herself. She no longer guarded peace as something fragile. It existed naturally. She trusted her environment. She trusted her choices. Matthew moved through the household with ease that came from alignment. He did not perform presence. He lived it. His actions matched intention without effort. They did not speak often about what they rebuilt. They did not revisit the past unless needed. The focus stayed on what worked now. Quiet happiness does not need validation. They shared responsibilities without friction. Decisions flowed easily. Differences were addressed without escalation. Respect remained the baseline. Evenings ended with familiar rituals. Meals together. Conversations that lingered. Silence that felt comfortable rather than heavy. There was no spectacle in this life. No statement made to outsiders. What mattered lived inside the walls they protected. Marceline remained distant. That absence no longer carried weight. Boundaries held firm without effort. The family they built did not mirror tradition. It honored values instead. Eloian felt contentment grounded in self-respect. Matthew felt fulfillment rooted in presence. The twins felt safety without understanding why. This was the resolution. Not perfect, not dramatic, but whole. The moral arc closed without grand declarations. Walking away had protected the future. Accountability had rebuilt trust. Choice had replaced silence. Quiet happiness stood as proof that love, when guided by dignity and responsibility, does not need noise to last. Silence shapes lives more than most people admit, not the silence of rest, not the silence of peace, the silence that appears when action is required and comfort feels easier, the silence that watches harm happen and chooses stillness over protection. This story began with that kind of silence, a moment where words were needed and none arrived, a moment where presence would have changed everything, a moment where choice was made without being spoken. What followed was not chaos, it was consequence. Silence did not explode anything. It slowly redirected everything. It redirected a marriage. It redirected a future. It redirected identity. Eloise did not leave because of one act. She left because silence revealed where she stood. She understood that love without defense leaves a person alone even when surrounded. Matthew did not lose his family in one night. He lost them through avoidance practiced long before that night arrived. Silence is often mistaken for neutrality. It is not. Silence sides with whatever already holds power. Silence protects comfort, not people. Choice, on the other hand, demands clarity. Eloise chose dignity when silence offered tolerance. Matthew later chose accountability when silence no longer shielded him. Both choices carried cost. Both choices shaped outcome. This story reminds us that life does not change through intention alone. It changes through decisions made when pressure appears. If you have ever stayed quiet to keep things calm, if you have ever waited for someone else to speak, if you have ever mistaken patience for protection, this story asks one question: what did your silence choose for you? Dignity often looks quiet from the outside. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It does not prove itself through confrontation. It stands firm when compromise asks too much. Eloise's choice to leave was not an act of anger. It was an act of love directed inward. She chose to protect her sense of self when staying required her to accept less than she deserved. That choice matters. Many people confuse love with endurance. They believe staying, adjusting, and absorbing harm proves commitment. This story shows something different. Love that erases dignity does not heal. Love that asks silence in place of safety does not protect. Dignity is not distance. It is clarity. When Eloise walked away, she did not reject love. She rejected a version of it that required shrinking. She chose to model a truth many struggle to live. That self-respect teaches others how to treat you. It sets the standard for every relationship that follows. Dignity also shaped how she raised her children. She showed them love without fear, structure without control, boundaries without cruelty. That is love with backbone. Matthew learned this lesson late, but fully. He saw that love requires defense, that choosing someone means showing up when comfort suggests staying still. Dignity does not close doors out of pride. It keeps doors closed when opening them causes harm. This story reminds us that loving yourself is not selfish. It is foundational. When dignity leads, relationships become healthier, not harder. If love costs your voice, your safety, or your peace, it is not asking for patience. It is asking for permission to continue. And dignity, when honored, becomes one of the most powerful forms of love there is. Accountability changes what silence cannot. It does not arrive through regret alone. It arrives when behavior shifts and stays shifted. When words match action long enough to rebuild belief. Matthew learned this the hard way. He could not explain his way back into trust. He could not apologize his way into presence. He had to choose differently and keep choosing, even when no one applauded. Accountability required him to face discomfort without retreat, to accept limits without argument, to protect what mattered before it was threatened. That choice restored connection slowly, because real repair always moves at the speed of safety. Eloise did not reopen her life because time passed. She allowed space because patterns changed. She watched consistency replace urgency. She saw responsibility replace avoidance. Accountability did not erase the past. It prevented repetition. That distinction matters. Many relationships break not because mistakes happen, but because responsibility never follows. This story shows that connection can return when accountability leads and entitlement steps aside. Children benefit most from this truth. The twins did not need explanations. They needed reliability. They learned trust through what they experienced daily, not what they were told. Accountability created an environment where repair felt possible without pressure, where affection could return without fear, where love did not ask anyone to forget. This story teaches a clear lesson. Connection grows where responsibility lives. Trust returns where patterns change. Repair works when accountability stays present. If you are seeking restoration in your own life, ask yourself this. Are you waiting for time to fix what only accountability can? Every story leaves something behind, not answers for everyone, but questions worth sitting with. This one asks us to look closely at our own choices, at moments when silence felt easier, at times when dignity asked more than comfort wanted to give. Your takeaway might be different from someone else's, and that matters. Maybe this story reminded you of a moment you stayed quiet when you should have spoken. Maybe it reflected a time you walked away to protect your peace. Maybe it showed you the cost of avoiding responsibility, or maybe it confirmed that growth is possible when behavior changes. Stories become meaningful when they connect to real life. So take a moment and share what stood out to you. Did Eloian's decision to leave change how you think about self-respect? Did Matthew's journey toward accountability shift how you view repair? Did the idea of choosing calm over wealth speak to you? Your perspective matters. When people share their thoughts, others find clarity in knowing they are not alone. Someone reading your comment might recognize their own situation through your words. This space is not for judgment. It is for reflection. Tell us what this story taught you about love, boundaries, or responsibility. Tell us which moment stayed with you the longest. Tell us what you would have done differently. Engagement is not about numbers. It is about connection. Your voice adds depth to this story, long after the final words are spoken. Scroll down and leave your takeaway. Read what others share. Let the conversation continue beyond this chapter, because stories live longer when they are shared. If this story moved you, take a small action now. Tap the like button. It helps this story reach people who need it. It tells the platform this message matters. Share this video with someone who might see themselves in it. A friend facing a hard choice. A parent learning how to set boundaries. A partner learning what accountability looks like in real life. One share can start a needed conversation. And if you believe stories should teach, not distract, subscribe to this channel. Love Tales with Mr. Easton exists for stories built on values. Stories about dignity, responsibility, growth that comes through choice, not chance. When you subscribe, you support more narratives like this one. New stories arrive regularly. Each one explores real decisions and real consequences. Each one asks you to reflect, not escape. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Stay with us as we explore love shaped by respect and action. Before you go, pause for a second. Ask yourself what you will do differently after watching this. Ask yourself where silence has cost too much. Ask yourself what boundary needs honoring now. Then act. Thank you for spending your time here. Thank you for engaging with a story that values clarity over noise and growth over comfort. We'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, choose dignity, choose accountability, choose presence.